startups around the world. And at Innovate BC, we help foster the ideas and solutions emerging out of our province so that all British Columbians can benefit from a thriving and inclusive innovation economy. So, what does that mean? We are champions of innovation and changemakers, relationship builders and community connectors, drivers of ecosystem data and storytellers. We work to create more opportunities for everyone to participate in our innovation ecosystem, working with strategic partners in BC and beyond. And our programs are designed to connect innovators to the resources they need to succeed. Looking to start and scale your business? Or learn how to navigate human resources, digital marketing, or intellectual property? We'll connect you with experts in your field and mentors to help your business grow. Need funding? Our grant programs can help you hire talent, commercialize your research, and validate your technology. Searching for innovative solutions to your most pressing challenges? Tap into our network of BC's most promising innovators and solution providers. We help companies large and small across industries drive innovation forward because BC is the best place to start, grow, and invest for tomorrow. Begin today and grow your idea with us. Innovate BC.
Well, welcome everybody. You have joined us this fine Tuesday afternoon, Innovate BC. This is opportunity to build capacity, to learn, to take in the knowledge that's going to be shared. But also today, I think is going to be a great discussion. So we really invite you to lend your voice, lend question, perhaps story. We welcome you. So my name's Michelle. I'm joining you from Amitzquitchie, Waskagan, Treaty 6 territory. We'd love to hear where you're all joining from. You can put it in the chat box. Spring is here. We have a new season, but I'm looking out my window and we got some clouds happening. But whatever day that comes across our path, we give thanks for the day. We give thanks for the goodness, the blessings that Creator has given to us. We give thanks that it's an opportunity to grow, to learn, to be challenged, to be moved. So we give thanks regardless, sunshine or not. We give thanks for the gift of this beautiful day and this beautiful moment that we have together. So it is my honor to introduce the one and the only Angela Adsit. So she is a proud member of the Tahltan Nation, the CEO of Indigenous Community Development and Prosperity, a principal of Emerge Engagement and Corporation, is a professional public speaker and has held several executive level positions in both for-profit and not-for-profit Indigenous organizations. She is also an instructor with several Indigenous and non-Indigenous training educational organizations and develops culturally aware curricula in Indigenous entrepreneurship and community and business development. So that's just a little snapshot of the powerhouse that's in our midst this afternoon. The conversation today is leading in chaos and talking about leadership. It's a combination of skills anyone can learn. So let's talk about that today, shall we? So Angela, thank you so much for being here. And we pass this mic off to you.
Thank you, Michelle. You're always amazing as usual. Thank you for your presence. Thank you, Tara, as well, for the work that you lovely ladies put into bringing this to our communities. And we just really deeply are grateful and appreciate what you do. So thank you. So folks, hello. It's lovely to see some names I recognize and some faces. Love it. Makes me really happy. Brings joy to my day to see other people that are really, really interested in learning and growing and in leadership, of course, which is what we all do in our own space. So confession. My PowerPoint is gone. So this is the first time I have worked with Can Do for several years, and I have to say this is the first time that my PowerPoint was corrupted. So it did not open, but that is okay because Creator always has, he always has much bigger plans than we do, right? So I totally submit to that, and I'm like, okay, this is awesome. So what is the opportunity here? The opportunity here is for us to have a conversation, just like Michelle said. So yes, a little bit about me. Michelle did share. I'm actually the CEO at XDC, which is in Williams Lake. So I'm the CEO for the Hatsoul Development Corporation. I've been there since last May. Love the work. Great board, great community, great chief, great. It's been fabulous. I really, really love being in that space. I'm an adjunct professor at Algoma University. So I teach in their project management course. So I teach their Turtle Island course, which basically is Indigenous history, and love that as well. So this past term, I had 84 students, and they were all from India, which was fascinating. So all of my students that I have been teaching are international students, which is really interesting because they tell me that I'm the first Indigenous person that they meet when they come to Canada, which is really, it's a privilege, but it's also a bit of, it's a big responsibility too, right? So teaching them the history and having those really conversations with someone who's so green is really fascinating because it brings you right back to like, someone who has zero knowledge and being able to build on that. So I've had some really exciting conversations around that. Yeah, I have right now I'm in what do you call it? A student. I'm a student with the Canada Coach Academy for the executive coaching certification. So I'm super excited. We're in week 10 of that. And so what I'd really like to do is for this session is to have more of a conversation and to allow you to present any questions that you guys might have around leading in chaos. And so you might be asking yourself, well, why can you talk to me about this? Like what expertise do you have in leading in chaos? And to be honest, every organization that you work with has some level of chaos. Okay, it just does. There's never an organization that is everything is completely streamlined, everything is efficient and effective, and the team has the perfect culture. I mean, it just doesn't exist. So there's a level of chaos in every organization that we work in. As leaders, it is our job to fill the gaps and to remove the barriers in any position that we have. And so sometimes, in some organizations, there might be more gaps than other organizations. There might be more barriers than other organizations, but there's always a level in every organization that you work in. So how do we do that? How do we find the gaps in the organization? Those things that are not really, that are it's like a road. If you have a road and there's 6 inches missing, that road ends, right? You have to have continuity. So what are those gaps that are not allowing for efficiency in the organization? As a leader, that's our job to find it. What are the barriers? What is stopping us from moving ahead? And often in Indigenous organizations, whether it be at the band level or it would be at the ECDEV Corp, nonprofits, you probably have all just heard what happened to the Aboriginal women's. Yeah, I mean, there's an example of very, very sad news, but that's an example of chaos left unattended by leadership, right? I mean, that really is what has happened. And so how can we as leaders, how can we help to, to fill those gaps and remove those barriers? So what I'd love to hear from any of you is, does anyone have like a specific question that they would like to, just throw out there and something that we can talk about sort of as a springboard to this conversation, because I mean, we're a small enough group this time that we can have this conversation. And I would love to have your input too, right? Like I'm only, you know, as professional as the experiences that I've had too, right? I have lots of education, but then there's also the added experience that we all bring to the table. So I would love to hear from you as well, what your experience has been. So does anybody have like just a question that they would like to kind of start us off on?
I do not mind getting this conversation started.
I knew it.
So
Rock.
yesterday, just yesterday, I was sitting in a group of just amazing people from different nonprofit organizations. So this is a money question. I think budget is always a huge one. Well, in my field, anyways. So one organization, they do phenomenal work, but they're going to have to close their doors in June because of the lack of finances or sponsorship or funding. So for me, as an outsider who's just learned about this problem, and really I'm not involved, but part of me just wants to help in some capacity. So anyways, my question is about budget and for non-for-profits, because I think that's a huge issue. Resources, how do you manage that in a good way without panicking? Because I really sensed this this atmosphere, not atmosphere, but this panic that they are shutting their doors. They've been around for 25 years. That's a long time. So that's my question around budgeting. How do we manage that? How do we move forward and not lose what was built because of lack of funding?
Good question. Move forward and not lose funding or continue receiving funding. That's a great question. Because yeah, money is sort of the foundation of every organization, right? It's not everything, but it's like oxygen. You do need it to live. Great question. So any thoughts from any of the participants? Anybody have any experience around that? Okay. So first of all, Michelle, I guess my first question would be, you know, you said the organization is 25 years old. Is their work still relevant? So their work is still relevant. It's still meeting a need. Okay. So one thing that a lot of organizations fall into, as you probably know, is complacency. Right? Complacency is resting on your laurels. You know, this is the way we've done it. This is the way we're always going to do it. We were relevant 25 years ago. We're still relevant today, but we're still doing things the same way. So I'm wondering, you know, at what point in time did their funding start declining? Or did they stop receiving the amount of money that they require? You know, how much is the organization focused on innovation and, you know, staying relevant to their whoever the end user is, right? It's kind of in that like kind of that marketing vein of the organization, right? So what is their story? Right? You know, because we all know that, you know, in marketing, I did a lot of marketing in my previous years, but you know, there's an old saying, I'm sure I've shared it on these webinars several times, but you know, facts tell, but stories sell. So what is the story of the organization? How are they telling their story? Maybe they've received and they've had funding for so many years that, you know, they just expected that it would just continue to flow. And so they've moved away from that creative side or that innovative side of their business. So what are your thoughts?
I really like what you said about the story piece, because when I listened to, you know, the problem at hand, before he shared that problem, he actually spent some time telling the story. That moved me so much. And I'm more of a thinker than a feeler. And it's Monday morning at 10 a.m. And I almost, you know, tears are forming my eyes. So he told the story in such a powerful way. So I'm thinking, I'm holding on to that. So part of me as somebody who understands, you know, the importance of what they're doing within community, so within Edmonton, and it would be a huge loss because they're probably the only organization that's tapping into that need in community. So it'd be a huge loss. So for me, I want to help. I want to go into problem solve, because I would hate to see this organization just dissipate, I guess. So the first thing I thought about as I was thinking in my mind is like this story needs to be told. And so I really appreciate what you said about, hey, maybe it's time that we get a little bit more innovative and a little bit creative. Because you're right. I think sometimes that, you know, if we've been in the business for that long, a little bit of complacency, you know, begins to set in. So I really appreciate those two pieces. And on top of that, the story. So that actually really resonates with me. So my wheels are turning.
Fabulous. And sometimes it's a story that we don't tell too, right? Like there's the story of the organization that you said really moved you, which is fabulous, and it should, right? That's why we give our money to causes that, you know, that our connection to money is more emotional than anything, right? And so we will often support organizations that touch an emotional string, right? But it's also the story that maybe they're not telling it, like what would happen, you know, if they weren't there, you know, if these people that they are serving, what's going to happen to those people that they're serving if there's no other organization. So yeah, that maybe it's both stories. Is it, can I ask you, is it City of Edmonton funding? Or is it more donation?
I think they tapped into some of that, but it's also donation as well. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I want to look at a couple of the responses here because they looked really good, actually. Ken says, deal with the chaos. Yes, Ken, that is so true. Money is where you find it, just like rocks with gold. Never stop looking. True. Nick says, is there an opportunity? Oh, hi, Nick. For partnership or collaboration with new partners? True, right? Absolutely. Find somebody with a money management skills. Yeah, absolutely. And that we don't know either, right? We don't know how they're managing their finances, of course. But yeah, fiduciary responsibility is a huge part of that as well. So sometimes, you know, I know when you're in a nonprofit, you're always looking outside, but there's two parts to money, right? There's bringing money in, and then there's also how you spend that money and the amount of expenses that are going against that dollar that comes in. So consider adding to the values added, the client served. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think, you know, money again is very emotional. It's we tend to use our money based on our emotion. And so let's really tap into the emotions of the people that they're trying to move the heartstrings for. Any other, is that good, Michelle? Good. Okay, excellent. Any other leadership questions, and you can put in the chat if you want, or comments, something, maybe a situation that you're in currently or you anticipate, or something that happened in the past that you know, that you wish you had handled differently, or maybe you look back and you don't really know how you could have handled it differently. Any thoughts or questions around that? Mm. Yeah, so I know that we've done other, I'll see yours as soon as it pops up there, Nick, but I know that we've done on our Can Do webinars, we've done another webinar on leadership. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere where, you know, I've presented on that before, but this chaos, leading in chaos it just adds that new dimension to leadership. And to me, to be very honest, if you're leading and no one is following, you're just taking a walk. Right? You know what I mean? Like you could be in a position of leadership, but if you're leading and nobody's following you, you're just taking a walk, right? You're not really leading. And so I think it's important, you know, as a leader to understand who it is that you're supposed to be leading, number one. And in order to understand who it is that you're supposed to be leading, you really have to know them as individuals. It's not enough anymore, especially among the younger generation. And I do say that because that is true. It's my experience too, that there is a certain level of expectation of there has got to be more. This is not just about making money, right? Often we take positions because we want to make a difference, or because, you know, we feel that our heart is drawn to that specific cause. And again, tapping into really what drives somebody in leadership is the key to getting good work done. And the only way that you can do that is if you understand and know your people. And if there's one thing that, you know, even in my experience, every position that I've been brought into, and to be honest, 95% of them are positions where there's mess to clean up, for lack of a better word. You know, I've been invited into organizations where there's been some challenges, like real challenges, real chaos. And the first thing that I do is I try to find out who it is that I'm actually going to be leading, and get to know them as individuals. Like what drives them? Why are they here? You know, make sure that they really, really understand the vision of the organization, you know, the mission of the organization, that we have that we understand the values of that organization, and we are holding each other accountable to make sure that we are upholding that vision, the mission, and the values. Because if you think about chaos usually happens, it doesn't matter in anything. It could be in a family, it could be in an organization. If the important values of life are not being, or they're not being lived, right? So we all say that, you know, we have the value of, you know, honesty. We have the value of being ethical. We have the value of being kind. We have the value of, but at the end of the day, if you can't look back and say that you've operated in honesty, then that creates chaos. Right? So when you really think about what is the chaos in a situation, it really has to do with the lack of following good values. Any comments on that? Nick said, when I hear leading in chaos, I think change management. How do we lead through unexpected change, through turbulent times? How do we establish stability, ensure continued buy-in, and reassure the team that we'll be okay? My example, an organization's shareholders just wiped out its board of directors clean, including the CEO. As a department heads, how do we lead through this brief period of uncertainty? That sounds really familiar. Yes. Yeah. Well, you know, normally my response to that would be, you know, it's it's normal. It's kind of expected that we as department managers would look to leadership to lead. That's an expectation. It's an honest expectation. However, department managers also have a group of people looking to them to lead. Right? So we have like these little mini camps. We've got we've got the leader that's managing the managers or leading the managers, and the managers who are leading their departments. So leadership is at every level. Like it's at every level. And I think that, as far as leading in chaos, I think one of the best things that a leader can do, the leader, is to teach your people how to lead. We want organizations full of leaders. So even if it's in a store, wherever it is, you got people that are working for you. Teach them how to be leaders. Not only be an example of good leadership, but teach your team also how to be leaders. So how do you teach people how to be leaders? Any ideas?
You show them, you lead, I would think.
Yeah. Perfect. Absolutely. You have to be an example. But I would say, and in my experience, the most important thing that we can do as leaders to train our people to be leaders is to trust them. What I mean by that is if I'm leading my team and I am micromanaging every little thing, and I am telling them I've given them, I'm like, you know what? Since we were talking about Nick saying, Nick, I'm giving you this department, but you are not allowed to make one decision without my approval. You are not allowed to spend $1 without, that whole thing. After a while, it makes a bunch of dependence, right? It does not help your team to be leaders. Exactly. Empowerment, engagement. So the safest thing to do is to always be thinking about, I need to, just like you do when you raise your kids, you don't raise your kids so they can live at home forever. Right? You're raising your kids so they can move on and live their life, right? But how do you do that? You do that by teaching them to be independent. You do that by teaching them how to clean their house, how to take care of themselves, how to make $1, how to pay their rent, how to whatever. Like that's what you do. You're teaching them to be their own leader, to have autonomy. Well, it's no different in an organization, right? If you want an organization as a whole to be stable, you have to teach everyone in that organization how to lead. Because if the top leader is gone, hopefully, if enough time has been given, that leader will have started the process of empowering their, who reports to them, the department heads, to be leaders. So that if something unexpected like that does happen, Nick, then hopefully those leaders in those departments have gained at least some skill or some understanding of what it should look like, what they should be doing with their team. Does that make sense? I call that succession planning, right? To be honest, it is succession planning because like the average CEO should not be at any, like they say the longest term of a CEO should be like 5 years. And I agree with that. Yeah. Because a certain CEO will come in and they bring their gifts to the table and they can whatever that is. But there does come a time when maybe it's time to bring in some, so I do agree with that. But and that's good for the team because they will learn different leadership skills from each of their leaders, assuming that their leaders are actually teaching them those skills. So yeah, this good succession planning is to train up your team so they don't actually need you. Thoughts? I asked this question, if you think of, because I think, leadership is, you already know what makes a good leader. So if I ask you and I say to you, you probably, I'm hoping, you probably all have one person that was your leader. Could have been for a long time, it could have been for a short time. But who was that person? Why was that person a good leader to you? What made that person a good leader for you?
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said trust. Because as I was thinking of my own employer, and absolutely trusts me. And so that I could just go do what I need to do. And that is it. That somebody trusts me in my gifts, in my capacity, and my abilities to do what I need to do within the context of my job. And that's huge. And I wouldn't have been able to I guess, be the leader that I could had I not had that trust. So that's great.
Absolutely. So Michelle, I have a question for you. So what if somebody came up to you and said, Michelle, you are incredible. I want to offer you a job at 30,000 more a year, but you're going to do this, and these are your lines, and this is your box. Not likely, right?
Nope. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, what's his name? The Virgin guy, Richard Branson. He said, train your people so that, they have the freedom to go wherever they want. Train them to leave, but treat them so well that they don't want to go anywhere. Right. And so what does that really look like? It really isn't tied to your pay. I mean, we all need pay, but we all know from the studies that, there's a certain level of pay where you're not any happier. I don't know, let's just pick a random number. Let's say it's 80,000 a year. Let's say you're making 80 grand a year. If you're making, 100 grand a year, are you really that much happier than the person that makes 80 grand a year? Like they say that there's this level, right, where nobody's really happier. Right. So what is it that really makes you want to stay in your job, right? It's usually because you have the freedom, you feel trusted, you feel empowered, you feel a connection to the work, you feel a connection to your leader. Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. I really like that, Michelle. And you do an amazing job, and it shows that you love your work. Both you girls do. Tara too. Actually, everyone at Can Do has been amazing. So, yeah. Oh, Ken added something. Believe that the funding will be solved and fake it until you make it. Okay, when in doubt, what to do, consider doing something different. Yeah. Brainstorming with similar service groups and other venues. Ask ChatGPT. That's so funny. With a prompt that has information as you think is important. Try, rinse, repeat. Absolutely. And that's part of leadership too, right? Is trying new things. And we talked about that, is that innovation piece. If things are changing for the negative, or, then yeah, when did it change? At what point in time did things change? And I mean, we can do that same principle, personally. Like when I used to own the gym, all the ladies would come in, and the first thing they're like, why are you here? And the first thing every woman would say was, well, I want to lose weight. I mean, that's just the I'd say 95% of the time, right? And so then we would go through a process of, well, how did you get to this point? And I would have them put a picture on their fridge of what they looked like when they were their happiest. Like, when were they happy with the way that they looked? And that was enough to, to motivate them to go back. So the question is like, well, what changed? What changed? Was it your lifestyle? Maybe, you hit menopause. That changes everything. Maybe something happened in a relationship. Who knows? But how do we get back? How do we get to that point where we were prior to what made us unhappy? And I strongly believe that one of my favorite sayings is, it's actually more important to know what you don't want than to think you know what you want. Because if we think, like if we have a vision and it's something that we think we want, well, often when you get there, after you've experienced it, you realize you didn't really want that. It really didn't bring you the joy or the peace or the happiness or whatever it is that you were pursuing. So it's more important, like, to be very clear about what you don't want in life, what you don't want in your work, what you don't want. It makes decision making a lot easier, right? And I think in organizations it's exactly the same. What do we not want in our organization? Let's go back to our values that we just talked about. How does chaos happen in an organization? Because they've walked away from their values. Nobody is living the values, right? Nobody's living the values, or very few, or the majority are not living the values versus the minority, or whatever. It always goes back to the values. So how do we get back to that? Comments? Questions? Yes, Mindy. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Sorry, I dropped off. I was driving and then I lost service, so I'm home now. I think, you're right about losing sight of values. The trouble with that, though, is what if those values were never clearly established, or you can say what they are and then a lot of things get misinterpreted, or everyone has their own version of what those values mean and can go this way or that way, right? So I think that's important. And that's what I think, when I think of chaos in Indigenous organizations, because we have a lot of the issues that stem from that intergenerational trauma, of understanding what some of those values are. And I think, it's to be real about that and have those conversations, I think sometimes is what even starts to crack the surface of kind of hopefully getting to that next stage that we need to get to. And what I've experienced in a number of situations, whether it's from an external lens, like he's working with the nation, but not for a nation, and seeing the things that are happening, as well as working internally and seeing that. So my question is, like, with those values, how do you get alignment with those values? And also, while you're navigating a space of navigating lateral violence as it's happening at the same time.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Anybody want to weigh in on that? No.
Well, and I think it's so, and it's not it's not to bring comfort, but it's just to recognize, though, like, that it's not unique in nature, and it's happening across Turtle Island, from nation to nation, to development corp, to nonprofit organizations that help Indigenous people, as you said, with NROC, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of people seen those fires internally coming before. Surprised the rest of Canada that they were having all those issues, and with removal of people, etc. Right?
So thank you for that, Mindy. Something really interesting about lateral violence that I learned when I had to write a paper when I was doing my MBA, and it was on lateral violence. That was part of it. So when I was doing my research, do you know what the #1 occupation is for lateral violence? Take a wild guess.
Social workers.
That could be close, but yeah, there's a lot of similarities. Anybody? Nurses. Nursing has the highest rate of lateral violence of any occupation. So, of course, I had to do a little digging. Why? Why was so much lateral violence in nursing? and I'm not going to be real, I don't want to say too much about our female folk here, but the majority of nurses are women. It's very patriarchal, right? The nurses feel like they are under the thumb of the doctors, and they're not empowered. They do not have the right to make decisions. There's a lot of that going on in the hospital. They say, when I was doing my research, it was something like 63% of nurses quit their first position within 6 months. So what they did, and Mindy, this is coming around to, hopefully to something that can contribute to the answer, but what they did to resolve that was fascinating. So first of all, it was an awareness campaign, right? They created the awareness, because really this is just bullying. That's all it was, right? Lateral violence is just someone's being a bully because they can, or they feel like they can. So what they did is they created this whole program where they educated the nurses about what bullying looks like. Then they educated them on exact verbal responses to comments that were bullying them. And they actually carried these, so they went through all this training, and then they gave them like a badge, their name, and on the back of it were the answers to when you're being bullied. This is true. This is what they did. So these nurses, as they would come in, the first thing to do is they get this training. Then they'd be given their name badge. On the back of the badge, they were given the exact responses to give. It totally empowered them to stand up. They knew what to say, so they were not like a deer in the headlights. It's intimidating. You're new in the job, you're a young nurse, and you've got this, 55, 60-year-old nurse who's been there for 30 years, and she's bullying you. That's really what they were running into. And so they learned not only that what it looked like, they learned how to respond, and they were empowered to respond. And I don't think it's any different in First Nation communities. I think that there is an awareness campaign. We talk about it all the time. We talk about lateral violence all the time. But are we really empowering each other to stand up? I don't know. I'm just throwing this out to you. Like, is this something, are we taking it seriously enough and holding each other accountable? Like, if someone's bullying you, do you have a response? Do you know what to say? I'm just putting it out there. This is what
I often feel like, even just because we understand, we know that term, we've heard it, lateral violence, and I feel like it's almost become weaponized, right? It's the bullier will use that and flip it often, right? Or it's like it doesn't have the same impact. It's become normalized again, right? So it's that's where I think, the awareness needs to be revitalized, right? And let's get to like the hard discussions about it, because I think it's been weaponized, and it gets glossed over now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's always a tipping point, right? You guys have probably read or heard of Seth Godin's Tipping Point book. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. Even just watch it on YouTube or whatever. They always have those books, where they do those cool little videos with it. Anyway, the tipping point is basically in any society, any organization, there's a tipping point. So, Mindy, to your point, if enough people stand up and enough people get this awareness, enough people, say, yeah, I'm going to be accountable, I'm going to hold you accountable, and we're going to support each other. Eventually, the tipping point will be there will be more of you than them. Right. And I think that's what we need to work towards is, and Indigenous women, like supporting each other, not allowing that. If you see it, you're speaking up. I have left board positions because, you feel like you're the only one, you don't have that support, right? And I think we've all been in those situations, right? Whether it's your work situation, it could be a board, it could be in your family, right? I mean, it could be anywhere where there's a group of people and there's group think instead of critical thinking, right? And willing to stand up and speak. But it's, yeah, we have to have enough people. We have to have enough people that stand up and say enough is enough, and this is how we're going to do it, but in a good way, right? In a supportive way, but in a strong way.
Yeah, and I think there are, just I'm altruistic this way. I truly believe there's more, people that want to do the right thing, but a lot of them, they're in that fear-based mentality, right? Like it's scary to speak up, and sometimes it's triggering in those spaces too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Ken said sometimes you cannot get there from here. And sometimes, as stated, every 5 years you cannot, every 5 years you can definitely not get there with the current positions involved. Yeah. Also, you cannot solve all the problems at the same time. Focus. That's true. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we can't attack. But that's why you need to get to the root cause. Like for those of you who have done business, you'll know they've got the fish diagram, right? Right. If you really, really want to figure out how to solve a problem, there's all sorts of tools to help you do that. But you're right. Focus on the one that's the most foundational, right? It might not be the tyranny of the urgent. You probably have all heard that saying, the tyranny of the urgent, right? It's kind of like you're always running around like a chicken with your head cut off, putting out these little fires. You're never going to get anywhere, right? That is not going to solve the problem. The problem is solved is when you get to the root of the problem, which is always people, and deal with that, right? Deal with that issue. So that could be, and like we were just talking about with Nick, empowering your team to be leaders individually, that you do not answer only to the leader. You all are in your own right leaders. And then, supporting each other to speak up. And yeah, it's a big thing, but you're right. Sometimes it's not with a group of people you haven't. I've gone into organizations where I don't like to lay off people. I very rarely have laid off people. But what I like to do is if I go into a situation and the culture is not good, because we all know culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't care how good your strategic plan is. If you have a crappy culture, nothing's going to move. So culture is always at the root of everything, right? So I will go into an organization and start cleaning up the culture if I have the authority and the power to do that. And the people that don't align with that culture, they leave of their own accord. Right? I've seen that. I've experienced it. So I've not actually had to fire them. We just work real hard to change the culture, and then they just don't fit anymore. Right? And so they leave. So, and everyone's much happier, of course, because they probably were causing problems anyway. They probably were part of the reason why the culture was all, not that positive, but, so there are ways to do it in a good way, to operate from that place of being ethical and being kind and but still doing your job as a leader. Any other thoughts or comments? Anyone have an example of good leadership in action that we could end off? I think that'd be really good. Do you have an example of someone that you've seen that was a good leader that did something that started to change the culture or the organization for the good? What did they do?
I will share quickly. So I wrote this paper a couple of years ago, and it's called "The Matriarch in the City." And so I had talked to, 4 grandmothers that I thought just demonstrated who they naturally are, but also their leadership skills. And one of them, I wrote about this beautiful woman named Trudy. And I asked her to come, and I was really nervous. Like, because no one would come. Like, I was really nervous, but I was like, the worst she can say is no. So let's just ask her. So I asked her to come do a pipe ceremony in our inner city. So in our inner city, that is a lot of our people who struggle with homelessness. It's just kind of messy there. And I knew if she's going to do a pipe ceremony, she'd have to put everything right on the sidewalk because that's where the people are. So I was really nervous, and I honestly was thinking she's probably going to say no because these are her sacreds. There was no hesitation. Take me where the people are. And so for me, that just really demonstrated leadership, but it also changed how we connect and move with other people, right? And you got to meet them where they're at. So for me, that was just a huge, beautiful demonstration of leadership.
I love that. And that goes back to our point that we were just talking about earlier, how important it is for the leaders to develop a personal connection to their team, the team that directly reports to them. Because if you don't understand the people, how are you supposed to lead them? How do you really have empathy? Right? And yeah, like, how do you understand? Like, I remember one organization, like, we would go get them out of bed to get them to work. It's like, you have a family to support. We care about you. We are going to come and knock on your door and knock it down to get you to come to work. And it worked, right? They just needed to know that someone cared enough about them to actually do that. And I mean, yeah, you have to really show that you care. Absolutely. People won't follow you. Again, if you're leading and no one's following you, you're just taking a walk, right? So, any other examples? Okay. Well, hopefully we'll have more stories next time. Good examples. I'll end off with one of the stories that really impacted me as a kid. So, I grew up in Uranium City, northern Saskatchewan, for grades 1 to 6, and the little skinny brown girl, and you just, there's a lot of, they want to beat you up and all this other kind of stuff that you kind of go through, right? But I had this one teacher, his name was Mr. Dobra, in grade 6, and he was a white teacher, white male, and he was kind and he was gentle. He never raised his voice at me. He, because I was like tall and skinny, I could run like the Dickens, and probably because I had to half the time. And he would spend time with me after school doing track. He said, Angela, you can run. I want you to be in the track team. So he would spend time with me like every day after school. And then he took me down to Saskatoon for the big provincial track meet. Of course, I never won any medals because, that was the first year I'd actually done anything like that. But, he made such a huge impact, and I think, and that's leadership, right? So I would say, think of those people that have really impacted your life, that really made a change, that made you look at yourself differently, because leadership is really about helping others to see themselves as they really are, which are competent, able, strong, capable, you have the ability to bring your gifts to the world in a way that matters. I mean, that's what leaders do, is they bring the best out in their people. So I would say figure out who those people are in your life and emulate them. Do what they did for you, for others. That's my 2 bits.
Beautiful. I mean, this was just for me, and I hope for the rest of you, this was a very thought-provoking hour that we spent together. I have taken so many notes. You had some really good one-liners, some tidbits in there that really were meaningful. So I really appreciate you leading us in this conversation, and even for me stirring the story within me and reminding me of who's around me. So thank you so much, Angela. And I thank you all for joining us. I hope you have a good rest of your day. And we're back next week. We got Jess. She's from J Shine Designs coming to join us. So we'd love to see you then. So be well, everyone.
Thank you. May do.